Ambassador Kethvar's crystalline form shimmered with what the humans would have recognized as barely contained amusement. The Galactic Council chamber, a vast sphere of bioluminescent coral suspended in the void between stars, echoed with the harmonious laughter of 1,000 species. At the center of their mirth stood a single human, Admiral Sarah Chen, whose weathered face remained impassive despite the cosmic joke she had apparently become. "Let me understand this correctly." Kethvar's voice resonated through the chamber's translation matrix, reaching every delegate in their native frequency. "Your species wishes to join the Galactic Council. After existing for a mere 200,000 years?" The laughter intensified. The Velthari, ancient energy beings who had witnessed the birth of galaxies, pulsed with colors that denoted deep amusement. The Zephyrians, whose hive mind had conquered entropy itself, buzzed in harmonious ridicule. Even the usually stoic Krillian warcast clicked their mandibles in what passed for chuckling among their kind. Admiral Chen waited. She had learned patience during humanity's first contact protocols, when Earth's governments had spent 3 years simply deciding who would speak for the species. Now, standing before beings who measured their lifespans in geological epochs, she embodied the quiet confidence that had carried humanity from caves to the stars in what these ancients considered a heartbeat. Furthermore, continued the Altarian delegate, her 6 arms weaving through the air in elaborate gestures of dismissal, "your primitive world lacks even basic planetary unification. You still wage wars among your own kind, pollute your singular biosphere, and have barely achieved faster-than-light travel." The truth stung because it was accurate. Humanity had stumbled into FTL technology through what could only be described as aggressive stubbornness, refusing to accept that certain physical laws were immutable until they simply weren't. The breakthrough had come from a graduate student who had spent 4 years trying to prove her professor wrong about Alcubierre drives, succeeding only because she was too naive to understand why it was impossible. The Council recognizes species based on technological achievement, philosophical enlightenment, and temporal stability, intoned Kethvar, his words carrying the weight of eons. Humanity possesses none of these qualities. Your application is denied. Return to your small world, and perhaps in a few million years, when you have matured as a species, we might reconsider. Admiral Chen nodded once, a gesture so simple that it somehow commanded the attention of every being in the chamber. "We understand your position," she said, her voice carrying across space without tremor or plea. "We'll be in touch." The dismissal was absolute. The human delegation was escorted to their modest ship, a converted mining vessel that looked like scrap metal compared to the elegant bioships and energy constructs of the Council races. As Earth's representatives departed, the Council members shared knowing looks and telepathic observations about the amusing optimism of young species. They had made a fundamental error. They had assumed that humanity's request for membership was a request for permission. 6 months later, the first reports arrived from the Outer Rim territories. Ships of unknown configuration had appeared in Zephyrian space, not with the typical flash of standard FTL, but with a subtle reality distortion that seemed to bend space-time like a lens. The vessels were crewed by galactic standards, metal and ceramic composites held together with welds that any proper engineer would consider barbaric. But they moved with a purpose that made the ancient Zephyrian queens pause in their millennia-old meditations. The ships didn't attack. They didn't communicate through standard channels. They simply observed. And then they vanished, leaving behind sensor readings that made no sense to species who had perfected space travel before Earth's sun had finished forming. The second wave hit the Krillian border worlds 3 weeks later. This time, the human ships didn't just observe, they helped. A Krillian colony had been devastated by a quantum storm, a natural disaster that should have taken decades to recover from using conventional technology. The human vessels deployed, something the Krillian scientists could only describe as impossibly focused stupidity, brute force engineering solutions that violated every principle of elegant design while somehow achieving better results than technologies refined over millions of years. When the Krillian war fleets arrived to investigate, they found their colony not just repaired, but improved. The humans had somehow convinced a quantum storm to stabilize into a perpetual energy source, using nothing more sophisticated than really big magnets and what appeared to be spite. By the time Admiral Chen's face appeared on every council communication channel simultaneously, a feat that required infiltrating communication networks designed by species who had achieved technological perfection, the reports were flooding in from across the galaxy. Human ships had appeared in Altarian space, solving a mathematics problem that had puzzled the species for 3 million years by approaching it from an angle so fundamentally wrong that it wrapped around to being right. They had assisted Velthari energy forms in repairing damaged star cores, using techniques that involved hitting things with bigger things until they worked properly. They had somehow convinced a Zephyrian hive queen to laugh, an emotional response that species had evolved beyond before humans had discovered fire. "Greetings, Galactic Council," Admiral Chen said from the screen, her expression carrying the same patient confidence she had displayed 6 months earlier. Behind her, through the viewports of what was clearly a massive ship, the council delegates could see the impossible. A human fleet hanging in space outside their most secure core world, having bypassed defenses that had been designed by civilizations, who understood the universe in ways humanity barely comprehended. We wanted to follow up on our membership application. The silence in the council chamber was absolute. Kethavar's crystalline form had stopped shimmering entirely, a sign of shock so profound that his species hadn't experienced it in recorded history. "How?" whispered the Altarian delegate, her 6 arms hanging limp in disbelief. Admiral Chen's smile was the same one humanity had worn when they first discovered fire, when they first looked at the sky and wondered what was up there, when they first decided that the word impossible was more of a suggestion than a rule. "We didn't ask permission," she said simply. "We just did it. The council voted unanimously to approve humanity's membership, not because they had been convinced of humanity's worthiness, but because they had suddenly realized something that would haunt their ancient dreams. If humans could accomplish this much while being denied council resources and guidance, what would they achieve once they had access to the accumulated knowledge of the galaxy? Some questions, the council realized, were too terrifying to leave unanswered. And in the depths of space, more human ships were already moving toward horizons that older, wiser species had long ago decided were unreachable.